President Trump says he's not a racist. He also says the immigration program that protects the dreamers is probably dead. But the deal making goes on in Washington with a possible government shutdown just days away. We are live on Capitol Hill. Two former Trump campaign insiders heading to the Hill this week. What will Steve Bannon and Corey Lewandowski tell lawmakers about the Russia investigation? And the agency that triggered that false missile alert and panic in Hawaii is now reportedly getting death threats. Are officials doing enough to make sure this never happens again? That's all ahead in this hour. I'm Trace Gallagher in for Shepard Smith. President Trump telling reporters he is not a racist. The president responding to claims that he made vulgar comments during an immigration meeting when he questioned why the U.S. is accepting immigrants from Haiti and countries in Africa. Fox News has confirmed the president used the word that's being reported, which we won't repeat here. But last week, the president tweeted this was not the language used. Here's what he told reporters last night.
No, I'm not a racist. I am the least racist person you have ever interviewed. That I can tell you.
Yeah, the president also says the program that protects the dreamers, the hundreds of thousands of immigrants whose parents brought them to the U.S. without documents, is probably dead. He tweeted that his approach to immigration is very simple. America first and make America great again. The president and lawmakers trying to reach a deal on immigration. Some Democrats say it should be part of a spending bill Congress has to pass by Friday to avoid a government shutdown. We have Team Fox coverage. The Fox Business Network's Adam Shapiro is live on Capitol Hill. But first, the chief White House correspondent, John Roberts, who is live on the North Lawn. John.
Trace, good afternoon to you. You mentioned that President Trump not optimistic about the chances of a DACA deal getting done. Here's what he's tweeting on that. Quote, DACA is probably dead because Democrats don't really want it. They just want to talk and take desperately needed money away from our military. The president last night in Mar-a-Lago again insisting he did not use that word S-hole in that Oval Office meeting last Thursday. Two Republican senators, Senator Perdue of Georgia and Senator Cotton from Arkansas, backing up the president to say that they didn't ever hear him say that. But Illinois Senator Dick Durbin today doubled down on his assertion last week that the president did indeed say it. Listen to Senator Durbin a short time ago.
I know what happened. I stand behind every word that I said. In terms of that meeting, I'm focused on one thing, not that meeting, but on making sure that those who are being protected by DACA and eligible for the DREAM Act have a future in America. I'm focused on that full time.
Durbin accuses the president of not negotiating in good faith, saying that everyone left that room last Tuesday. And here's a look at that meeting, which was a week ago tomorrow, with an agreement in principle to fix DACA. But at Mar-a-Lago, the president said he hasn't been delivered a deal that satisfies what he says was agreed on.
Honestly, I don't think the Democrats want to make a deal. I think they talk about DACA, but they don't want to help the DACA people. They don't want security at the border. We have people pouring in. They don't want security at the border. They don't want to stop drugs. And they want to take money away from our military, which we cannot do.
So everybody left that meeting saying that there was an agreement on what they agreed on. The White House perspective on it, Trace, was that they agreed to do a DACA fix with border security, which included funding for a wall, an end to chain migration, and an end to the visa lottery. But clearly, Democrats have a very different idea of what was agreed to on in that meeting. Trace?
And what about the government shutdown talks? What about that, John?
Well, let's first of all see where we're going with DACA. And the White House is sending some officials, likely John Kelly and Mark Short, the legislative director, up to Capitol Hill tomorrow for a meeting that the House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy will be holding, along with Senator John Cornyn, Dick Durbin, and Steny Hoyer. That's the kind of the gang of four that's been working on this DACA deal. The White House still optimistic that they will get a deal on DACA, though they say it's highly unlikely it would happen this week. They say there's still too much ground to cover. Now, on a government shutdown, White House sources also still optimistic that they can get a continuing resolution, not a full budget deal, but a continuing resolution by the deadline on Friday, the 19th. They believe that the Democratic caucus could not hold together to stand together to shut down the government over DACA. So they believe that there will be a continuing resolution, but then still, negotiations over DACA and getting a budget deal, because there's a lot of insistence that those two things be tied together, are going to be difficult. So when the president gets home from Mar-a-Lago tonight, Trace, he's got a very difficult week ahead of him, no question.
Indeed, he does. John Roberts live for us in the North Lawn. John, thank you. Team Fox coverage continues now on the push to reach a deal on immigration and avoid a government shutdown this weekend. Adam Shapiro is senior correspondent for the Fox Business Network. He's live for us on Capitol Hill. And Adam, Republicans, they can't pass a funding bill without the Democrats, clearly.
It's looking that way. You just heard John Roberts describe some of the hurdles they face. And even if the Republicans on their own could pass a continuing resolution in the House, when you get to the Senate, you need 60 votes. Republicans only have 51. So they're going to need Democrats to either cross over or, as is happening, you've got Senator Dick Durbin, who's holding out for some kind of DACA deal. Senator Rand Paul was on Fox and Friends earlier this morning, and he said these two things should be separate.
I think the immigration debate is sort of separate, hopefully, from funding of the government. But that's a question. Will the Democrats hold up spending and funding of the government over this issue? I've always still thought immigration was going to be settled separate from the spending issue. I still think it will be and should be.
But again, Trace, the question is, would they have some kind of deal in order to get the votes they would need from Democrats in the Senate? And that's what's being negotiated, as you heard John say. Tomorrow, they're going to be meeting with the players from the House and the Senate to try and figure out what does it take to go forward.
And Adam, the Democrats say they are not about to back off on an immigration deal.
No, they're actually digging in on that. Although Dick Durbin, the senator from Illinois, who kind of leads the charge in the negotiations for the Democrats on the immigration deal, on the DACA deal, he was asked about the president and whether there could be some kind of compromise within Congress for this. And here's what he said about 2 hours ago.
If they will help us reach a bipartisan compromise to protect those who were protected by DACA and to give them those who were eligible to sign and Dreamers a chance, it is clear evidence to me that they're moving in the right direction.
So to sum it all up, Trace, both sides are looking at each other saying we need a compromise, and both sides are waiting for the other side to blink. Back to you.
Yeah, Adam Shapiro with the Fox Business Network. Adam, thank you. Let's bring in Rachel Bate. He's a reporter. She is a reporter who wrote an article on the immigration debate for Politico. And Rachel, the thing is, you listen to all these people right here, and they're talking about the fact that, look, there is some wiggle room here. The president said DACA's probably dead. And then you have, Dick Durbin saying, we're willing to work a little bit here. So there is some wiggle room to get this thing done, correct?
I mean, I'm not going to rule out them doing a DACA deal at some point, but from the sources I've talked to on the Hill, there's a general consensus that they're not going to have a deal by Friday, which is when Democrats wanted to see this agreement come together. Look, bipartisan discussions have totally broken down after reports about the president making those vulgar comments about African nations. Right now, we're seeing a lot of finger pointing on the Hill with top Trump allies saying Dick Durbin is a liar and made this up completely. We also see House Democrats saying they want to censure the president. There's also Democrats who are afraid to work with the president now because there's a fear of a backlash by the Democratic base if they work with the president who has said things like this in private. And lastly, there was a meeting on Friday between Republicans and Democrats in leadership, and from sources who are familiar with the meeting, it sounds like the comments from the president the day before were sort of hovering over everybody's heads. They were sort of entrenched in their position. There was no real negotiating going back and forth, and one source told me specifically he doesn't see them getting a DACA deal at all.
It's interesting, Rachel, because you say that the immigration deal is kind of broken down on both sides now, but has it broken down, or do you think that Democrats are kind of using these comments the president made, the vulgar comments the president made, as kind of a bargaining chip, saying, you know what, we can use this to maybe get a little bit more out of this deal, maybe get a little less security along the border, and then we'd be willing to talk a little bit?
It's a great question, and I do think that there are some Democrats who are pointing to these comments and thinking that it sort of bolsters their leverage. And I say that because in this meeting Friday, I was told that staffers for Steny Hoyer, the top Democrat in the House, doubled down on their position that they only want to do DACA and border security, but they are unwilling to negotiate on other immigration policies that the president would like to see, such as changes to chain migration, redoing the diversity lottery program. So I think there's a little bit of a split in the Democratic Party right now. Obviously, some of them want to position themselves, don't really want to cut a deal right now because they think it'll hurt them with the base. But then there are also Democrats who do want to make a deal. Think about Durbin, for instance, who agreed to make these changes that some of his own colleagues are angry at him for making that agreement.
And you have Democratic Senator Joe Manchin coming out today saying, look, this is an easy lift. We can get this thing done. The Democrats have already gotten a lot of the stuff they want in this deal. And the Democrats have to be a little concerned, Rachel, that if they don't pass this DACA bill in time, they've got to be worried about the Trump administration being a little aggressive when it comes to, to deportations of these dreamers.
Saying it's easy. Senator Manchin saying it's easy. That's certainly not the case, as we've learned from the past few weeks and months. I think the interesting thing here to watch is, do Democrats try to shut the government down over a lack of a deal Friday? From my sources on Capitol Hill, it sounds like the discussion has shifted from talking about, can we get a deal by Friday on DACA, to, oh no, we're not going to have a deal. What's plan B, and can we keep the government open? Right now, my Republican sources have been talking about doing a short-term spending agreement just until February to give themselves more time to negotiate. And Democrats previously in December, they backed a short-term agreement because they were afraid that if they shut the government down over DACA, that the president's going to say, look, Democrats are shutting the government down, trying to protect undocumented immigrants, and that won't play well with anyone, a lot of moderates as well, too. So I think that Democrats are not willing to strike a long-term budget agreement without DACA, but I think shutting down the government is a totally different issue, and I would be surprised if they do it.
Yeah. And I think both sides are kind of loosening up a bit on both of those issues, and as the week goes by, I think you might see a little bit more willingness from both sides to cut a deal. Rachel Bade, love your perspective. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, the person who hit the wrong button in Hawaii and caused a nuclear panic will no longer be anywhere near that button. That's good news, right? That's as furious people call up the agency responsible with death threats. So many calls that officials are now brushing off the death threats as people just blowing off steam. We'll take you live to Honolulu with the fallout next. Well, Hawaii's emergency management agency is getting death threats after a false missile alert sent people into a panic. That's what a spokesperson for the agency now telling Fox News. Just after 8 a.m. local time on Saturday, folks across the state got this message on their cell phone. Quote, ballistic missile threat inbound to Hawaii. Seek immediate shelter. This is not a drill. Of course, we now know there was no missile heading toward Hawaii. State officials say an employee during a routine shift change just kind of hit the live alert button by mistake. Oops. It took 38 minutes to send out a second alert, which read, quoting, there is no missile threat or danger to the state of Hawaii. Repeat, false alarm. That means for more than half an hour, more than 1 million people thought a missile was about to hit them. One person described it as the most terrifying few minutes of my life. Others talked about calling their family members to say their goodbyes. Our chief engineer here, his wife tried to call him to say goodbye, couldn't get a hold of him. Will Carr is live for us in Honolulu with the latest. Will.
And Trace, they're trying to return to a sense of normalcy here. There's a Martin Luther King parade going on behind me, and we're more than 48 hours removed from this botched text, but the governor continues to apologize, and that's something that really seems to have resonated with President Trump.
I love that they took responsibility. They took total responsibility, but we're going to get involved. Their attitude and what they want to do, I think it's terrific. They took responsibility. They made a mistake.
We've learned that the employee at the Emergency Management Agency has been reassigned while the investigation continues. We've also learned that they put new protocols in place, having 2 people sign off on future text alerts. But some question why the state and not the military would be handling a text alert like this to begin with.
You know, the panic, the fear that hit our residents as well as all of our visitors that were here, it's inexcusable because it's a mistake.
There will now be both state and federal investigations and hearings trying to figure out exactly what happened here, breaking it all down and how they can make sure it never happens again, Trace.
Yeah, it was just bedlam for those 38 hours. We talked to a lot of people down there. Will, some people in Hawaii say they're still concerned, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're talking about a terrifying near 40 minutes. Some people simply didn't know what to do. Some families tried to put their kids down in the sewer. Others gathered in their garage thinking they were spending their last minutes with their loved ones. It is no secret when you talk to the residents here in Honolulu that they know Hawaii is a target. This goes all the way back to the Cold War, to Pearl Harbor as well. So certainly a text alert coming out like that has raised concerns, especially when it comes to our back and forth with North Korea. Trace.
Will Carr live for us in Honolulu. Will, thank you. We had friends that actually said they didn't know what to do because they were filling up bathtubs and thought, wait a minute, no, that's for hurricanes. It's a missile. What do we do? Where do we go? A lot of people just did not know. And of course, the false alarm in Hawaii came as tensions with North Korea reach a high point. And right now, countries from around the world are coming together to deal with the threat. But not every nation is there. We are live at the meeting in Canada. Next. Top officials from more than a dozen countries meeting in Canada this week to discuss North Korea. But China and Russia took a pass. They're not there. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson is co-hosting the summit. State Department officials say the meeting will show international solidarity against North Korea's nuclear program. Rich Edson is live for us in Vancouver, where the summit is taking place. And Rich, they're expected to talk strategy and really how to isolate North Korea, right?
Right, Trace. And this is a way to try to circumvent or try to prevent North Korea from circumventing United Nations sanctions, perhaps even the creation of a naval blockade to ensure that North Korea is further isolated per these UN sanctions. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson is on his way from Washington, D.C. He's arriving this evening in Vancouver, Canada. Ahead of the meetings, he will also have discussions this evening with the Canadian Foreign Minister and his counterparts from Japan and South Korea. The State Department says the United States and Canada invited countries that joined the U.S. effort in the Korean War more than 60 years ago. That means China and Russia were not invited and will not be here. China accounts for 90% of North Korean trade. It's integral to the U.S. effort to try to isolate North Korea. The State Department says it has coordinated with those governments ahead of this meeting and will continue to do so as these meetings progress, though Russia says that's nonsense. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov saying, quote, "It's outright lies. We said clearly that we consider these efforts and this meeting to be destructive." Now, the full summit begins tomorrow. Meanwhile, earlier today, North and South Korea continued their meetings about the Olympics. The South Koreans agreed that North Korea would be allowed to send a 140-person orchestra as part of their growing delegation to the Olympics next month in Pyeongchang, South Korea. They even discussed the creation of a joint women's hockey team. If that were to happen, it would be the first unified Korean team to participate in the Olympics. The two marched together in the opening ceremonies in 2006, but they didn't compete together. North Korea has brought the South in for these discussions, and it has been reciprocated by South Korea. South Korea has also agreed to suspend joint military exercises with the United States. That's seen as two very large concessions by South Korea and even the United States here, and North Korea has given up absolutely nothing. So analysts are saying that these recent discussions between the two countries is a way for North Korea to try to drive a wedge between the United States and South Korea. Those countries are supposed to continue meeting on Wednesday to continue their discussions about the Olympics. There are also concerns by some analysts that South Korea may want to discuss matters beyond issues with the Olympics. As for the United States meeting with North Korea, the administration has said and the State Department have said only when North Korea makes a signal or a move to begin to have a willingness to surrender their nuclear weapons program, ballistic missile programs, will the United States meet with North Korea. Trace, back to you.
Rich Edson live for us in Vancouver. Rich, thank you. It's a busy week for lawmakers looking into Russian meddling, elections, meddling, possible collusion, the mix. Former Trump campaign manager Corey Lewandowski and former White House chief strategist Steve Bannon set to meet with the House Intelligence Committee. So what could we learn from their appearances? A live report on that is coming up.
I'm Leah Gabriel with the Fox Report and more headlines from the Fox News deck. Dramatic video shows the moment a floor gave way at a stock exchange, hurting more than 70 people. Happened in Indonesia's capital of Jakarta. Cops say no one died, and they are ruling out terrorism. Police say most of the people hurt were college students there on a tour. a major oil spill in the East China Sea after an oil tanker exploded and then sank. The Iranian ship had been burning for about a week after it collided with a freighter. Officials say none of the 32 members of the tanker survived. The search and rescue operation now turning into a cleanup effort. And an airliner skidding off a runway in Turkey, dangling on a cliff over the Black Sea. A local news agency reports the pilots told investigators that there was a sudden surge in the engine speed after they landed, and it caused them to lose control. Officials say 168 people were on board, but no one was hurt. The news continues with Trace Gallagher right after this.
Well, two of the biggest players from the Trump campaign meeting this week with lawmakers investigating Russian interference in the election. Former campaign chief executive turned White House chief strategist Steve Bannon and former campaign manager Corey Lewandowski. They are both scheduled to speak with the House Intel Committee. While he was with the campaign, remember, Lewandowski reportedly received emails about Russia's interest in meeting with Team Trump. Those messages, apparently from former campaign advisor George Papadopoulos, circled here. He's pleaded guilty to lying to the feds. Lewandowski says he has absolutely nothing to hide. And then, of course, there is Steve Bannon, who called the Trump Tower meeting involving a Russian lawyer promising dirt on Hillary Clinton, quote, treasonous. Then, after President Trump said Bannon lost his mind, the former campaign chief tried to walk back some of those published comments and called the Russia investigation a witch hunt. The chief intelligence correspondent, Catherine Herridge, is live for us in Washington. Catherine.
Well, thanks, Trace. Speaking to WABC Radio, the former Trump campaign manager said he would testify voluntarily this week to the House Intelligence Committee behind closed doors. Lewandowski, who we expect on the Hill midweek, said he is not concerned because he has no ties to the Kremlin.
I have nothing to hide. I didn't collude or cooperate or coordinate with any Russian agency, Russian government, or anybody else to try and impact this election. I'll be happy to come out and set the record straight about my lack of involvement with any type of foreign entity.
As the president's former chief strategist, the focus will be on Bannon's time on the campaign and not at the White House. Bannon is expected tomorrow behind closed doors. And for context, the House Intelligence Committee routinely conducts interviews in private because the testimony often touches on classified issues. Bannon brought in some expert help to prepare for the testimony, hiring lawyer William Burke, a former White House counsel, and federal prosecutor. Burke is not representing Bannon with the special counsel Robert Mueller. Trace.
And, Catherine, the top Democrat on the House Intel Committee is accusing Republicans of trying to rush the investigation a bit.
Well, the senior Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff, accuses committee Republicans and House Speaker Paul Ryan of blocking key witnesses and testimony in an effort to shut down the investigation before it's complete. The House Minority Leader put it this way before the break.
Last week, I sent a letter calling on Speaker Ryan to allow the Intelligence Committee to continue its investigation, but received no response. To date, the House has held only one full committee public hearing on the most significant finding of the report, the continued vulnerability of our elections to foreign interference.
Congressman Schiff said committee Republicans blocked subpoenas for Deutsche Bank, and those records may have shown whether the Trump family has done business with Russian entities and allegedly laundered money through Trump properties. Democrats also want but failed to obtain subpoenas for Twitter to review direct messages between the campaign, WikiLeaks, and its founder, you see there, Julian Assange, who released the stolen emails from the DNC and Clinton campaign. And they also wanted communications about the June 2016 Trump Tower meeting. In a statement, a spokeswoman for the House Speaker said, well, Mr. Schiff tries to distract from the serious bipartisan review that's been underway for nearly a year. We will stay focused on following the facts and working to safeguard the upcoming election. Committee Republicans also say the investigation has run its course, and they point to the fact that the key FBI witness interviews should conclude this month. Trace.
Catherine Herridge live for us in D.C. Catherine, thank you. Let's bring in Nicholas Johnston. He is editor-in-chief of the news website Axios.com. And Nicholas, we should probably point out, first and foremost, we talk about timing is everything here. Bannon was invited to the House Intel Committee to speak before them a long time ago, well before Michael Wolff's book Fire and Fury and the comments he made there. So this isn't an attempt by Congress to kind of, pay off or play off the bad blood between Trump and Bannon, correct?
No, absolutely. This was something that had been scheduled, like you said, a long time before, and there was no way any of these committees would not include Steve Bannon on a list of important people they need to talk to.
Yeah, and so Bannon's got to be a little concerned. Lewandowski, you just heard Catherine Herridge, or maybe you didn't say. Lewandowski says he's got nothing to hide. Bannon's going to go in there, and you know the line of questioning is going to be on the remarks that he made in the book about this meeting between Donald Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, and the Russian lawyer that he called treasonous in the book.
Yeah, absolutely. Corey Lewandowski is unambiguously loyal to the president. I thought the sound clip you played before that was perfect. The way he sort of explains how there was no collusion, there were no ties to this. He's happy to speak about it completely. Steve Bannon, I think, particularly in light of the Wolf book, is a little more of a wild card. We've seen him talking to Wolf about how these meetings were treasonous, about how the Kushner real estate empire is nothing but a money laundering scam. So I think it's far more interesting to see how he may approach it. But I think it's also worth noting that it's probably less likely to take any of these kind of attacks on the Hill, where there are Democrats present, and this testimony might be leaked. What I'm far more interested in is seeing when Bannon goes before the Mueller special counsel.
Yeah, and we should point out that, he tried to walk back some of these comments. Steve Bannon we're talking about. He made the comments and tried to walk back some of the comments. He still says that he's professing his loyalty to Donald Trump. You call him a wild card, but there's, when you're speaking before Congress, are you saying, look, there's a chance he could say something that he doesn't want to say, or he's going to measure his words very carefully as he goes in there? What's your
that's
assessment?
absolutely true. Why we call him a wild card is what our reporting has shown is that right before the Wolf book came out, when he knew what he had already told Wolf, he was still telling friends he supported Donald Trump, wanted to run Donald Trump's re-election campaign. If Trump didn't win, he wanted to run for president himself to further Trump's policies. And at the same time, he knew what he had said to Wolf and what was this bombshell that was about to come out in Washington and this book. That's why I put this as a wild card, and I'm not sort of 100% either way on where his testimony will show up. The same I am with Lewandowski.
What do you make of these accusations, Nicholas, that the Republicans are trying to get Bannon and get Lewandowski in there so they can just wrap this whole thing up and get it over with?
I think certainly Republicans are looking to try and sort of end this sooner rather than later. Democrats, of course, want to draw this out much further. But remember, this committee is just one of many other probes going on. If the House Intel Committee gets done and issues a report, there's still the Senate committees looking into these kinds of things. And remember, Robert Mueller and the special counsel is nowhere near being finished.
We should note that Bannon hasn't spoken to any of the three congressional panels looking into Russian collusion here.
Right.
Does that play a part in this at all?
I think it just makes this more interesting. This is his first testimony, which means it's important. I'll be very curious to see if pieces of this come out. Remember, on the Hill, we've had some interesting things with leaks. Remember, Dianne Feinstein on the Senate side released an entire transcript of one of the hearings over there over the objections of Republicans. So I'll be certainly sending my reporters out to figure out what they can find out as much as they can from both of these two hearings.
So what's the most important questioning? I mean, you're sending out there, you're looking for something. What do you tell your reporters as they go in there? What are you looking for? What are you looking for the Intel Committee to go after Bannon? What are they digging for in there?
I think the fascinating part on Bannon is if he follows up on the same things he said in the Wolf book, calling these kinds of meetings with the Russians treasonous. If he continues that line, I think with the committees, that's something that'd be very fascinating for me, and I hope to report it out.
And it's fascinating because he has yet, he hasn't said those were, I was misquoted, or those were not my quotes. I mean, he hasn't said anything. He's kind of backed him off a little bit, but he never said he didn't say it. So that's interesting as he goes into this meeting with the Intel Committee.
The word he used is regret. And remember, he talked about Donald Trump's son, who was in a lot of these meetings, as someone who'd be cracked like an egg on national television, certainly not holding the president's son in high regard for these kinds of meetings. And so if he brings that line of comments to the investigating committees, that would be fascinating.
Nicholas Johnston, good of you, sir. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Well, we have extreme weather alert now and a look at the very icy Hudson River in New York. This Coast Guard cutter is working overtime in the freezing weather to help keep people's homes warm. We will explain next. But first, more brutal winter weather on the way. Meteorologist Adam Klotz is live in the Fox Extreme Weather Center. Adam.
Hey there, Trace. Yeah, it has been brutally cold across the middle of the country. As a result, a snow system sweeping across the country as well, really hitting areas like the Midwest, stretching back down into the Ozarks. At this point, that's going to continue to push off towards the east. On the backside of it, the temperatures have dropped, plummeted really, currently sitting at 5 degrees in Minneapolis, 3 degrees in Rapid City. But if you add in the wind chill, that's what it feels like when you step outside, and it feels cold. Negative 15 in Minneapolis, negative 21 degrees in Rapid City. That's going to continue to settle across the country. Colder air is on the way for a swath. This is the leading edge of that cold air, and it's going to bring snow. It's going to bring freezing rain back into areas of Texas. This is going to be a big system. I'm now taking you into Tuesday. You can pay attention to the timestamp in the corner as this eventually runs up along the East Coast. As it moves, there are